Willie Mays was a baseball legend. His most famous catch is one of the most iconic plays in baseball history. But as you know, Willie Mays chiefly played in a pitcher's era, the 1960s. Well, I was thinking the other day and I started to wonder what would happen if we took Willie Mays and we transported him to the 1990s. You know, what they call the silly ball era, the most notorious offensive era in the history of the sport. It's a historical injustice, actually. Mays was really one of the greatest players of all time, and yet his accomplishments have been overshadowed by the steroid crowd. Well, this is our chance to right that wrong for great justice. As usual, we'll use OOTP 25 for this experiment. Okay, now I know that OOTP is not the only sim out there. It's also not necessarily the most accurate sim, but we'll get to that later. OOTP, however, is undoubtedly the easiest sim to use for career sims like this. I mean, this is a lot more cost-effective than, say, buying 22 different Strat-O-Matic computer seasons. And although the graphics are not earth-shattering, as you know, they at least give us something to look at. And so I created a new save. We're going to start this one in 1987. You probably don't think the 1987 is part of that famous offensive explosion, but the truth is it kind of is. It was an outlier year, at least for home run production. The real reason we want to start 1987, though, is because we want Willie Mays to hit his prime years during those huge offensive seasons that started with 1993. In other words, we want to give him the best possible chance to do something spectacular. This time we're keeping all the financial settings at default, and we're going to start with the 1950 Willie Mays, who was 20 years old at the time. Now, as you know, Mays played in Birmingham for the Black Barons in 1948. What you probably don't know is that he also played for the Black Barons in 1949 and part of 1950 too. Those stats don't show up on Baseball Reference. However, in this case, there is overwhelming newspaper evidence. I don't think that anything sinister is going on here. I just don't think that there are enough game accounts or box scores to allow us to have a complete or publishable statistical view on him in 1949. Anyway, all in all, I figured that 20 years old was pretty realistic for going to the majors. In real life, Mays was recognized as a superstar early on. He was absolutely incredible with the Minneapolis Millers in early 1951. The Giants called him up in late May that season, and he never looked back, even after having a slow start in the big leagues. In OOTP, I was curious about where he'd wind up in 1987. He was a free agent after all. He hadn't signed yet by opening day, though a number of teams were interested in him. In the end, he wound up signing with the Dodgers. Yeah, he signed with the Dodgers. No, I didn't make it happen. Yes, it is beautiful poetic justice. And yeah, it's going to be that kind of project, isn't it? The funny thing is that Mays was scouted in winter 1949 by the Dodgers in real life. They concluded that he couldn't hit a curveball and passed up on him. Okay, I need to provide some context to this. This is a couple months after the 1949 Dodgers famously let Don Newcombe pitch in the minor leagues for weeks while the big club was struggling. And they were struggling with pitching. Remember, I'm doing a 1949 replay. Ostensibly, the Dodgers made that decision because management felt that there were too many black players on the team already. Yeah. Now, I strongly suspect that this kind of passive-aggressive racism is the reason why the Dodgers did not sign Willie Mays as soon as they saw him in late '49. So yeah, maybe this project really is about historical justice after all. Mays, of course, was the batter on deck when Bobby Thompson hit that famous home run in 1951. Mays played in all 6 games of that 1951 World Series, but managed only 2 singles and 2 walks. In OOTP, Willie wound up starting at center field right after being signed, sharing the outfield with Pedro Guerrero and Mike Marshall. The real-life 1987 Dodgers had Mike Ramsey starting out in center during the beginning of the season.
That's popped up. Matt Williams is there in foul territory.
Ramsey was a career minor leaguer whose only shot at the majors was his 1987 cup of coffee. After Ramsey went back to the minors in mid-May, the Dodgers went out and got John Shelby from Baltimore, who played center field. Meanwhile, in OOTP, Ramsey stayed down in single A ball now that the Dodgers had Mays. See, this is one of the reasons why these longer saves are best done with OOTP. What I really need to make this project work is a computer general manager that can stick a reasonably realistic squad together. I mean, this isn't perfect, of course, but it sure is better than nothing. You can't just stick a player in a squad randomly and just play with it. I mean, it's not realistic. There would be some kind of player movement to compensate. And so Mays started off his career with the Dodgers. He played very well for a 20-year-old rookie, hitting 42 home runs and batting .304. He didn't even touch the leaderboard, however. Mark McGwire hit a whopping 88 home runs. I'm not kidding, this was so out of this world that I thought the sim might be broken. Here's Mark announcing his presence in Texas. But Mays looked pretty good too. Los Angeles, however, never overcame its lineup problems and wound up finishing 5th, 25 games out. Well, at least they finished above the Giants. I guess that's saying something. Now, in real life, Willie Mays didn't manage to win the MVP award until 1954. In OTP, he won it in 1988, his second year. He won the award unanimously. Mays led the National League in home runs that year with 38. The Dodgers managed to pick up Ryne Sandberg during the season in exchange for Tim Scott. Scott was a minor league pitcher who didn't look like much. I think that trade was a salary dump. And by the way, because of this experience, I'm going to start messing with the finances before the projects start in the future. Otherwise, these teams in big cities wind up with too much of a financial advantage. I mean, yeah, salary dump trades are realistic, but the Cubs trading Ryne Sandberg? Anyway, the Dodgers finished in first place after a tremendous season. The Dodgers then faced the Killer Bees of Pittsburgh in the NLCS, and it was rough. Pittsburgh wound up making short work of Los Angeles before losing to Oakland in the World Series. Sure, 1988 had been a dream year, but 1989 was even better. Mays wound up winning the Triple Crown in 1989 with 40 home runs, 134 RBIs, and a .351 batting average. Obviously, it was another MVP season for Mays. However, the Giants wound up winning the pennant, beating out Los Angeles by a single game. Mays was injured during the stretch, and the Dodgers couldn't overcome losing him. Mays signed again with the Dodgers for 2 years before the 1990 season and got settled in. You know, this happened with my earlier Bond simulation too. I really need to change these settings to encourage these guys to play elsewhere while they're young. I mean, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does lead to some complacency. The Dodgers slid to third in 1990. They did win the pennant in 1991, though. Mays played in his first World Series that year against the Red Sox. Unfortunately for Willie, Boston won in 6 games. The Dodgers just missed the playoffs in 1992, this time finishing behind San Diego. Montreal, led by free agent signing Rickey Henderson, won the World Series in 7 that year. Well, I thought that was poetic justice for Expos fans, and I thought I would mention it. Hey, it must be realistic if a Canadian team won in 1993. Willie Mays kept on rolling. He had 46 home runs in 1993, leading the league. He was the MVP that season, his third selection, and he led the Dodgers to the World Series once again. Mays looked comfortable in the spotlight. But the Dodgers lost in 5 again. We've played, what, 7 seasons already? We've got 3 MVP awards for Willie and 2 World Series appearances, though they lost both times. Willie also won the Triple Crown once. That's better than in real life. Yeah, I've got a feeling he was a pretty good player. When 1994 rolled along, I was reminded why I disliked the modern division structure so much. It's cluttered and confusing. Mays led the Dodgers to the NLCS again. However, the Dodgers lost to the Mets in the NLCS. One of the reasons why I don't like the modern structure of baseball is the fact that you get all of these playoff rounds. Legitimately good teams suddenly have a real hard time even making it to the World Series. I know that there are people out there who like them. I know that it makes it so that teams aren't necessarily way out of the pennant race early in the season, though in the end I really do prefer a strong regular season to endless rounds of playoffs. That set a pattern. The Dodgers made the playoffs again in 1995, but lost to the Astros in the NLCS. In 1996, they were swept in the first round by the Braves. Mays was hitting well, sure, but his numbers started to trail off a little bit as he reached his late 20s. And that's actually not far off from what happened in real life. Well, of course, he had that big move to San Francisco in real life, which probably contributed to his slight decrease in home run hitting. I guess we can assume that OOTP is adjusting for this properly, but then again, I'm not sure that we should be assuming anything. I mean, we just saw Mark McGwire hit 88 home runs in 1987, right? Seems to me that the game engine could still use a little bit of work. Whatever the reason, by 1997, Mays was no longer showing up on the leaderboards. The Dodgers, meanwhile, were absolutely loaded with talent. Los Angeles soared to another easy division title that year, and this time they won the World Series. The 6-game series victory for Mays was surely a sweet moment after coming so close so many times in the past. Though he wasn't a league leader, Mays had another solid season in 1997. We had an all-Los Angeles World Series in 1998, but the Angels won. Willie had been with the Dodgers for years now. He was 31 years old, and it looked like he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. Mays was back in real life in the World Series for the 3rd time in 1962 at age 31. So yeah, I think Mays has had a lot better luck so far in this project, and the Dodgers really have had an incredible run so far. Willie's contract was up at the start of the 1999 season in OOTP, and negotiations with the Dodgers stalled out. In the end, Mays wound up signing with the Montreal Expos. The Expos finished 3rd in 1999, never really competing. However, the change of scenery propelled Mays to the top, where he hit 61 home runs and drove in 183 with a whopping 10.2 wins above replacement. I'm pretty sure that 1999 was Willie's best season in this project, and yeah, I think that the offensive-friendly era may have had something to do with it. However, playing in Montreal kept him out of the postseason for a while. Willie hit his 600th home run in 2001, and it looked like he wasn't going to stop. The Expos made the NLCS that year, and Willie felt at home again. But the Astros beat them in 5. A relatively weak Expos team made the playoffs again in 2002, and this time we had an All-Canada World Series. But the Expos went home quietly after being swept by Toronto. Montreal lost in the first round of 2003. And at the end of that season, in the ultimate bit of poetic justice, Johnny Damon hit a dramatic late 2-run homer for the Cubs to win the 7th game of the World Series. By 2004, Mays was aging and his stats were starting to slide. He did hit his 700th home run that season, though sadly this replay has him in the wrong uniform. Now, let me ask you this question. Would the Expos really have moved to Washington, D.C. in 2005 if they had just been in the World Series in 2002? And would they really have moved if they had a fan favorite player like Willie Mays on the team? Willie's stats really started to suffer in 2005. By 2006, his morale was down. He was nearing 40 and was no longer a regular starter. He somehow convinced the Angels to sign him for 2 years at the start of the 2007 season. The Angels played well, but finished nowhere near the playoffs. By the end of 2008, Willie was nothing more than a part-time player. Willie was 41 years old by this time. In real life, of course, he moved to the Mets at age 41, and he was there long enough to experience his final World Series. Willie's chief contributions to the 1973 World Series included this at-bat, his final career hit. There was also this argument at the plate in the same game.
It's a high fly into left field. Not too deep. Rudy's there. Tagging is Harrelson. Will he gamble? He's coming. Here's the throw. And he is out at home plate. He's out. Willie Mays.
Now, I thought for sure that OOTP Willie would retire by this point. His offensive production had tailed off, and he was basically compiling stats, hate to say that, and collecting paychecks by this point. But, well, OOTP's computer managers sometimes make some strange decisions. Willie signed a minor league contract with the Padres in 2009. Okay, this one's on me, guys. I promised earlier on to no longer do these crazy OOTP saves with the minor league since it takes up so much time. But I included them this time around. I thought that maybe Mays would end up starting off in the minors. Well, we didn't need them. It slowed things down, and apparently it also prolonged his career at the end. Mays played about half a season and was somewhat productive, but the Padres were awful. Mays then wound up signing with the Blue Jays in 2010, going back to Canada for one more trip. His stats were no good. In November, he finally decided to retire. Now, Mays had obvious Hall of Fame credentials. He was a shoo-in. And just look at his awards. He won the MVP an incredible 6 times. He had that Triple Crown year. He was selected to 16 All-Star teams. He was Rookie of the Year, and he won the World Series in 1997. And sure enough, Mays made it to the Hall of Fame on the first ballot with 99% of the vote. Yeah, I'd like to meet that sports writer who didn't vote for him. Anyway, I wanted to show you a few quick things here at the end about historical accuracy. Here is the historical accuracy page. Sorry for the extra real-life years on top. For a glorified spreadsheet, OOTP lacks a lot of basic functionality. Notice that the home runs per at-bat totals were significantly off in a few years, sometimes too high, sometimes too low. Alright, I know that this stuff comes out in the wash, but I was really surprised to see this happen. I mean, I suspect that including all the minor league players and teams might have contributed to this. It's cool to see the computer pull up guys who never made it to the show in real life, give them a chance, but sometimes they can really skew the stats. And having Mark McGwire hit 88 home runs in 1987 is unacceptable in the baseball replay community. And here are the all-time leaders. Notice Barry Bonds with his 97 home runs in 2003 and his 994 career home runs. Now that's crazy. Willie wound up with 757 career home runs, surpassing both Ruth and Aaron. Well, maybe he decided to keep playing to make sure he got past hammering Hank. All in all, it was a fun project. Sure, it wasn't the real thing, but it is a lot of fun to stick players in strange environments to see what happens.